doing it. All kinds of weird things can kind of ensue. This also helps too when you're just modeling in general and you're manipulating multiple pieces. You just want to make sure that you turn off and on what you need at a time, right? So it's just really helpful to use that. So in here, I'm going to first turn off my rocket, my chest. We'll start with something easy. We'll start with the shoulder pad. Okay, so I want to unwrap this shoulder pad. Okay, we have to open up our UV texture editor, which is this guy right here. Like I said before, it has UVs. It has a UV shell in there, but those are not what we want. Those are actually completely wrong. So the first thing we're going to do is go in polygons, delete UVs. Okay, when you do that, you're not going to see, once you click on your object, you will see no UVs whatsoever within there. As before, we saw that kind of T structure, that's completely gone, right? There's absolutely no UVs in there. But what we want to do now is actually make UVs, okay? Okay, so we have our little shoulder piece right here that we want to kind of cut the skin off and unfold, right? In order to do that, I'm going to first select my entire model, all the faces on it, okay? I'm then going to come up to create UVs, okay? And then I'm going to go down to the planar mapping function, but I'm not going to click planar mapping. I'm going to click the little detail box next to it. If you do click planar mapping, it's still okay. It all kind of works the same way, but this just kind of helps you kind of choose where you want to project from. And the way it works is when you unfold something in 3D space, it's going to use a point of projection as your starting point. So if I was doing a can and I was looking at the can head on, I would want to project from the front or the side, cut a seam down the back, and then unfold it like I'm pulling it towards myself. Okay? If it was like the shoulder pad, I'd probably look down from the ceiling, look straight down at it, project, cut around the bottom and the sides, and then kind of pull it all open. Right? So you just want to, and that just kind of helps you. You don't need to think that way. Regular planar mapping works just fine, just from a simple z-axis is fine. But when you use it from specific angles, you'll just get a better, easier time unwrapping things. Okay? So under my UVs, I'm going to go to planar mapping, click my little box. And this guy I'm going to do from the top down, so I'm going to click the y-axis. Okay? And I'm going to click project or apply. We'll do the same thing. Okay? So you'll see, once I did that, it gave me my projection, right? Basically, what this representation is inside the UV space is exactly that. It's a camera projection of all the UVs of that model from the top down, okay? And what it does is when it gives you this initial shell, it's not unwrapped. There is a UV shell there, but it's not unwrapped. It's all kind of still fused together, basically in 3D space. It's like a flattened out version of all your UVs compacted together, right? It's that shape from that projection, okay? But what we need to do now is make cuts around this entire object so we can actually unfold the whole thing, okay? Now, before in Maya, in previous versions of Maya, you had to use like their easing tools and their kind of, there was all these different kind of tools that helped you kind of relax and ease the model up. As of 2015, I think they acquired Unfold 3D, which is basically an algorithm that just does it for you on one click, which is really, really, really helpful. So you can't mess up too much anymore, where before it took a lot of time to do it. So let me just show you both examples of it, and you'll see how great Unfold 3D is. It'll make your life way easier. Okay, so right now we have our model here that, Are you still recording? Yeah, I believe so. Yeah, we're in. So we have our model right here. If I were, you see right here, it has the UV projection right here. If I wanted to unwrap this, I need to make some cuts in there, right? So the old way of doing it, and it's kind of similar to the new way, but the old way is I'd come into this model and I'd say, okay, you know what? I'm actually going to cut this guy up. We'll go all the way around the bottom. We'll cut them up into two pieces. We'll get the bottom. Oops.
Actually, I remember doing this.
Nope. Go around. We'll cut this entire bottom out. And then where the corners are, I don't want those to pinch together when this part unfolds, so I'm just going to select these top corners to help kind of ease that open. Right, so just like that. So really, when this is cut and unfolded, I'll have two pieces. I'll have a bottom piece, which is kind of a square by itself, and then I'll have this top piece with these kind of flaps on the side of it. Okay, so the way cuts work in Maya is really simple. You just select the edges, just like I did right there, the edges I want to cut, and then in my UV editor window, I'm going to go down to Polygons, Cut UV Edges. Okay, and you'll see once I did that, down in my little result thing in Maya, it tells me polymap, cut 1. That means it made a polycut. Okay, so these UVs are actually cut. So then if I come into my UV texture window and I grab this tool right here, which is the Move UV Shell tool, it's also the UV Selection tool. If I come in here, I can actually see that now I have two pieces, right? It actually cut those pieces for me. And Maya's kind of funky, or Maya 2015 actually is kind of funky. I always have to go back and forth between the regular move tools and the UV move tools because it does this kind of weird snapping thing. Notice that? I don't know why it does that. So sometimes I'll just go in and grab my actual move tool, and then that kind of relieves that issue. I don't know why it does that. But with that being said, so the old way of doing things was once you have a certain UV shell selected, you'd come up to this kind of, it's called the Smooth UV tool. You click it, and then you'd get these two little unfold and relax icons. In here, you'd click in the unfold area, hold down your left mouse button, and just drag out. Okay? You see what it did? It kind of unfolded that piece for me because I made those cuts on the sides, etc. Right? On the bottom piece, I would click that piece, go to my unfold thing, click in here, and just kind of drag out. Okay? And that completely...
Three-dimensional objects to two-dimensional objects, can you do that?
What's that?
Does it turn like a three-dimensional object to a two-dimensional object?
Kinda. It's taking the skin of the object and flattening it out, right? So that was the old way of doing things. Okay, so that it's still totally fine. You can do that for particular pieces if you need to. But the new way, it kind of got rid of that, and it has this new feature called Unfold 3. As of Maya 2016, I believe they actually eliminated the Smooth UV tool, or they've actually changed it into multiple tools now to help easing and stuff like that. But with these two pieces here, so I'll show you the difference. So right now, these are good, right? This thing's unwrapped. We've got a couple pieces here, good to go. Let me just undo this real quick. Bring these back to where they were. Okay, so instead of using that tool, which is perfectly fine, and you can use that, but it is the older way of doing things, now they just have a new tool where I can just click those two pieces in there, go to Polygons, Unfold. Right? Now, the only thing Unfold does that I don't like that much is it doesn't necessarily keep things the same size all the time. So you will need to go in, click each individual shell, and just kind of resize them as needed. But it just automatically will unwrap them for you so you can get your pieces. Okay, and it automatically, based on its unfolding algorithm, it will find the best, or it'll try to find the best unwrapped with less distortion on your character. So if I come in here and I look at this, I turn my little thing on, you'll see it looks pretty good, right? Now, one of the things you want to do is, especially on any particular piece, you'll see that, okay, the bottom side looks a little bit more detailed than the top side, meaning that the reason we have this little kind of checkerboard pattern is we can see the texture density, right? So see there's actually more texture density down here than there is on the top. So an easy way to fix that is to just come into, let's say, this top piece right here, and just kind of blow this up a little bit to get those more or less the same size, right? And then we can just take these pieces and throw them off to the side.
Can you rotate one of them too?
Yeah, you can rotate them, do whatever we need to. And when we start actually aligning all of our UVs in this space, what I like to do, what I really like to do is actually really make these larger so I can really see that nice texture density on there, see if there's any weird stretching or anything in the texture. Just throw them off to the side of my model, or anywhere really, because it's a nice layout function that's actually built in to Maya that will just lay out everything for you once you've got it all unwrapped. It'll just kind of pack it in there and you're good to go. So that piece looks pretty done. Good to go. Okay, turn the preview off. Now, because we're working with multiple pieces, let's go ahead and let's go to the carrot piece. Go here, put this over to the side. You'll see those UVs aren't that great, right? If I preview it, yeah, those look really messed up, right? So same thing, I'm just gonna select all the faces, go to my create UVs, planar mapping from the y-axis, click apply, right? It's gonna give me that projection from the top, which is fine, it looks good there. On the sides, you can see it's kind of stretched out, funky looking. On the bottom, it looks okay. But
What's about the letter printing?
what's that?
The U1, V1?
So that's showing, so you can actually use multiple space, in UV space, you can actually use like all these different spaces if you're using multiple materials and things like that. But we're just gonna keep everything in UV1, okay? So if you have,
actually drawing texture on the right there on the surface.
yep. So with that being said, we're gonna come in here, make our cuts. So again, I'm just gonna cut these corners. Corner, cut that corner.
So the axis you choose, is that always world space?
Yes.
I'm assuming you can't double click like before.
You could. Just kind of used to just kind of signaling them out. All right, so we got all those.
Is there a reason you unwrap it into two pieces and don't leave an edge unselected so that it folds
So
flat?
you could do that too. Sometimes I think the results not great, especially for things that are stacked. I have these kind of bent edges, and they're also kind of curved, so that there's kind of there'll be some kind of funky stretching when it does. If I were to do that, keep one of those edges connected so it leaves it right. There'd be some funkiness going on, or maybe some overlap when it actually unfolded it. So I just like to cut them into two pieces and just put them right next to each other. Either way, I mean, you still could get away with the other way too if you needed to. In fact, you could actually probably have it where it connects right there at the top, so it doesn't get that, but
Yeah.
whatever. It's really however you want to do it. There's no right or wrong way, right? So cut UV edges, made my cuts, come down here, click my pieces, polygons, unfold, right? You can see it saves a lot of time. Instead of having to go in and ease it out and do all that. That used to be the old way. Look at my pieces here. Those look pretty good. Let's get them as close as possible. I might just come in here to this bottom piece. So grab this guy and just shrink him down a little bit. And you just want to try to get them as close as possible. They don't need to be 100% accurate, but as close as you can. And then what I like to do is just put those off to the side. And then, as I start creating the different pieces, you can kind of selectively see. So those are pretty close to the same resolution, so those are good. But as I create more pieces, there might be some pieces that you don't want as much texture density in, especially if you don't need, they aren't as detailed and things like that. So you can kind of selectively do that as you go through your model and unwrap each one of these pieces as you go. So these two look great. Next piece up is going to be our chest piece. And I'm not worried about those stacked. You see that in there. Just real quick. They're kind of overlapping, just sitting in there. Don't worry about that. When we use our layout function, it'll just automatically stack those and make them all nice for us. So I'm just kind of piling them up. I like to think of it as just, I unwrap and I just throw it in the pile of all my shells, right? I'm just literally just creating all these shells, and then I'm going to let Maya do all the work of sorting it and making it all perfect, right? So this is just a quick way of doing it, right? You could really go on there and make it a really nice UV unwrap. If you were doing like a client project and had multiple artists working on a model, you wanted it very nice for them, especially if you're going to do things like have textures that are changing or emblems or things like that. You'd probably want to do that. But if you're just making a character for your own project, whatever, this is totally fine. Or even something you're going to sell and nobody really cares about, it's fine too. All right, so come in here. Now I'm going to work on the chest. Now the chest is a little more complicated. There's a lot of different sections on here that we can actually cut out. So in order to do that, we're just going to first, same thing, grab the whole thing. And I'll just do the same as before. The create UVs, let's do planar mapping. The y-axis is totally fine. Click apply. But now we're going to come in here and cut multiple kind of sections and pieces out. And this is just kind of time consuming, but it's the same process. We'll just come in here and go, okay, we'll say, actually I'm probably going to turn this so you can see what I'm doing. Alright, so we'll probably take, actually here, this piece out as its own. Piece right here. Oops. And down here. And I'll just go all the way down. Sure, I'll just get all that too. Trying to organize this guy into specific shells. All right. So actually here we'll just leave that. Go right there. So you'll see I've got this cut going all the way around this entire piece. Actually, you know what? We'll actually probably cut that out. That's its own piece. A piece here, piece here. Just go around my entire model. Cut that out. Come in here. Make some cuts there. Cut the edges here. Down here. I'm just strategically looking for places that if it were to cut this up, where's it going to make the most sense when it gives me all these UV shells, all right? So that looks good. Cut these up. Anything that's a box, I usually like to cut the four corners out just to evenly kind of give me nice flaps to work on. Here. Looks good. Same with here. Just go around your model and just look for areas to get these pieces from. Come around here. This piece, this piece, this piece. I'll take this whole piece out by itself. I think that's going to be, I'll get this guy right here. This thing just had a lot of little pieces all over it, so it's a good idea just to go around and just kind of give it the appropriate edge cuts. Okay, I think that should be okay. We'll see how that turns out. Shouldn't be too bad. Okay, so I've got that whole thing sliced up, ready to go. There we go. Come into, and you'll see it selected all those edges around this entire piece. I'll go to polygons, cut UV edges. It's going to give me, oh, it's going through and cutting. Let's stop. There we go. Cut. There we go. So you have all these different pieces in here. I cut up from this model. pieces, small pieces, whatever, right? And then what we'll do is we'll select all of this, go to polygons. I'm going to go to unfold and click the little options box next to it. Rescale. That's fine. We'll leave all this. Unfold illustration. Okay. Click apply. It's now all unfolded. If I then click on this piece, click on my little texture pattern, you can see it unfolded everything, but we do have some issues, right? Some it makes bigger, some it makes smaller, etc. So we just kind of need to go through here and just kind of clean those up. So an easy way to find that is if you go to UV, you can find the UVs. Just kind of make these all close to the size as possible. All right. That one. Now this one's a little funky on how it unwrapped. And if you do get issues like that, like this guy right here, I probably should have eased him a little bit, but I just come in and add an extra cut. Come into this guy, polygons, cut UV edges, click on this piece. Actually, maybe I'll just do some extra cuts in here. Edge, polygons, cut UV edges, click on this little piece, polygons, unfold. Back to this guy, fold, there we go. Now UVing is probably the most tedious, boring part of 3D. So just remember that when you're doing this. It's not the funnest thing in the world, but it is essential to your modeling and whatever you're doing. I mean, anything you do in 3D, you're always going to be dealing with UVing at some point. So it is a time-consuming process, but the better you get at it, the more you do, it gets pretty quick after a while. I actually learned to really like it after a while, and you might too. So just keep at it. All right. Let's find this. This guy. That's a little too. Oops. I see this guy's got some funky things going on, so I might come in here and just slice him up a little bit more. Which looks like it's. Let's see. Let's see. No, where's that? Go ahead. Trying to find a certain piece on here real quick. There we go. Polygons. Images. If you do have Maya 2016 at home, you will really, really, really like it.
It is free.
It is free. I'll try to get it here sooner than later in the studio. Okay. It's gonna come up.
Free for students.
Let's make use of it. You'll notice
Be able to automate the relative scaling.
it does have that. So once you get it as close, it does mess up though. I'm gonna take that with a grain of salt because it does do it, but it doesn't because you'll think it does, and then all of a sudden there'll be one piece that's like the smallest piece of your model, but it takes up the biggest space. You're like automatic sizing my ass, right? It doesn't. It it likes to think it does, but it's not perfect, right? So that's why I do this. I just kind of go through and get everything as close as possible. I think it helps it kind of train it a little bit when you do that to get it more accurate. Maya 2016 does a much better job. Like they really, really refine the UVing in that program. So if you do have it at home, I highly recommend it.
Now, can it automatically cut too, or is that still manual?
So there is there is automatic, and there's automatic in here as well, but it's not optimal. You'll get the reason I do manual cuts is because it'll give me the shells that make sense, right? When you do automatic, it's just going to be like, well, you obviously don't care, so I'm just going to, I mean, it doesn't know what you want in terms of
Slice it
UV
nice.
shells. I'm going to slice it wherever I want and give you the pieces that I'm going to give you. So you'll get the shells and it'll be unwrapped, but it'll be like, man, like when you start, if you want to start going in and fine tuning things or having pieces where you know where specific things are, it's going to be all over the place, right? So it's good and bad. If you just want to get something done and don't care, yeah, like do the auto
Are
unwrap.
there performance implications down the road for like
No.
runtime?
It's all the same if you use auto or manual. I like to do the manual method. This is kind of a mix of manual and automatic. I'm just using the automatic unwrapping, essentially. But there is an automatic cutting and unwrapping as well. That's okay. It's not the best. And that really goes nuts in terms of the sizing and stuff like that. Okay, so this piece is having some issues. And you can see we're getting there with this guy. Just a little more work. It's the thing when you're working on models. There's going to be points where there's little things. There's always little things here and there that need to be fixed up. So this guy can be cut up. And I'm not too worried about seams between pieces because that'll all be blended once we texture it. So we'll go ahead and cut the edges. Hard. Okay. Let's say more or less this guy's okay. Some areas are a little bigger than others, but it shouldn't be too much of a big deal. Let's see. And it's kind of give and take here and there. I mean, you won't get it 100% perfect, but just as close as you can, it'll still look great. Let's see. Unless you want to be perfect and get everything absolutely perfect, but at the end of the day, you won't worry about it too much. Polygons, unfold. You'll come into weird issues like this guy. Or I think it's just that center piece right here that's causing all the issues. I'll just go and cut that out. These little side pieces. Polygons, cut you the edges. There we go. That's more like it. That one's smaller, that's fine. We'll go ahead. A little bit bigger. Oh. Alright, almost there. Where's this piece at? Grab this guy. Bigger. Okay, great. Piece looks awesome. We'll stick with that. Okay, and like I said, we're just kind of throwing all these pieces everywhere. We're going to let Maya stack all that into our layout for us. It's okay to have these kind of floating around. So that's unwrapped. So if we go back, get our carrot piece, our shoulder pad. Got all these pieces here. All right, it's coming together, right? Next up, get the chest detail piece. Should be pretty easy to unwrap. These guys off. Let's come in here, look all the faces, create UVs, and I'll show you the auto unwrap real quick if you want to see it. You just go, I think it's create UVs, automatic mapping right here. You just click that. Tell it how many planes you want, so I'll just go 3. Fewer pieces, enter projection, that's fine. Okay, and we'll say apply. That's kind of what it does, right? So you can see it's not really optimal, right? Really, I'd want all this as one piece. This kind of gave me all these separate pieces, right? Like, it's kind of funky how it does that. And it also doesn't really care too much. It tries to do a good job, but there's a lot of stretching going on and different things, right? But you can do it. It's good for, I like to use automatic unwrapping for things like props, like things I don't care about, like not my hero objects. Like if I'm working on hero objects and things I'm going to be seeing all the time throughout my game, that's when I'm really going to concentrate on doing nice UV shells. But if it's like rocks and props and trees and stuff like that around my scene, it's like, yeah, auto unwrap it all day and then just color it in Mudbox. Who cares, right? So it's kind of just picky choosy as you go through. Oops. Let's come through here. Let's get this on the side right here.
So the UV shell is what Mudbox is actually reading.
Yes. Okay, so again, I'm going to go edit UV, create these planar mapping. Skip that. And you know where you put your cuts sometimes, you kind of want to hide them from the camera. So this guy is actually, you can see it a lot, but this one on the bottom you can't see as much. So I'll just get those. That. That. Okay. Polygons, cut UV edges. Come here. Unfold. Right, so you see here, I got that nice kind of row of UVs. So I just come into shell. Right, I've got the nice shells here I can use. The interior, the exterior. Interior pieces. That one's a little funky. Oh, that's because it doesn't have a... It won't unwrap properly if you don't give it the right cuts, right? So, polygon, cut UV edges. If I go in here, that's still not great, but this is probably one of those situations where we can manually unfold it. That's not liking. Wanting to get there. Sometimes you get funky things like that, where it's like I said, it tries its best, but sometimes you really have to kind of coax it. Like, no, dude, go this way.
What did you say?
Yeah, like seriously. You go here, you go. No, I want a straight line, and it's like, oh, that's what you want. Okay, polygons, unfold. See, like it's like, then it's like, oh, okay, I get it now. I get what you're trying to do. Now it's making sense.
Algorithms.
Yeah. That's just it gets confused sometimes. You kind of have to like hold its hand. Okay, that's looking good. Got all these pieces. All right, we're getting there. We've only got one half of our model unwrapped. Barely.
Let me know when you're done.
What's that?
Let me know when you're done.
Yeah, right.
Just wait everyone. I think they know.
I'm gonna come in here, grab this guy, same thing. All the faces. Create UVs, planar mapping. go. Edges. Just like the ones I just did, we'll do the same thing. This one I'll do a little less, I don't care too much. Okay. Get the edges, grab all these pieces, and unfold. Okay. Looks like I had some issues with. Needs to be fixed. This just needs a big edge down the side. There we go. You just kind of want to go through each piece and make sure they're good to go. It's looking pretty good, pretty solid. Okay, take all that and shrink it down. Alright, so we've got all our pieces now unwrapped in here. So if I go object mode, click on each one of these, I can then go back into my UV texture editor and you'll see all my pieces, right? Now that I have them all selected, they're all unwrapped, we can compact these into that space, right? And then make it an object that we can then bring into Mudbox and actually do stuff with. So what we want to do is go polygons, layout, but we want to click the little details box next to layout. And then in here we'll go layout objects. We want single or multiple objects, not overlapping. That's what we want. We have multiple objects that we want non-overlapping. Prescale, we don't want to prescale any of them. Shell layout, into regions, fine. Scale mode, we want uniform. Is fine. Okay, do I want? No, actually, no. I want none. Uniform will make them all uniform scaled into there. We want to actually keep our scale that we've already set, but just pack them into the region. Let's see, percentage space. We'll just do it for.
Now, if you did uniform, would that guarantee that the checkers are all the same size?
It does it per. It'll do it per UV. You know, that's a good question actually. I think it only does it per shell. In terms of the actual UV space, so it's not going to be relative to the world, right? It's going to be relative to just the UV space. So the shells, it'll just make them all fit within that UV space. I think that it'll just make them all uniform. So I think if you preset them like I did here, and then shrink them down, it'll keep that size you set, but just kind of scale them to fit within that area. I think it's either uniform or none that does that. We'll see right now. So let's do a 24:8 map. That's great. So then all we do is we just click layout UVs. Oh, there we go. Oh, I did 2048, so I made it a little bigger. But yeah, there we go. Right? So you can see it laid it out into a nice square for us, and it kept all the same size. Yeah, you want to keep none set, so it'll keep it exactly how you set it. Right? Because we have this giant space, we're going to go ahead and make this a little bit smaller. So I'm actually going to turn off the square. We know that the texture density looks good and the unwraps looks good, so we're just going to go ahead and shrink that down a little bit. I'm going to make it a little bit smaller than my actual UV space because we have more stuff that we need to make on this robot, right? We've got heads and legs and arms, and I'm just kind of guesstimating right now, but and this is just for for what we're doing. Usually I'd finish the entire model, but I don't want to spend forever doing this, so I want to show you guys right now exactly how I can get this into Mudbox and actually do something with it. But let's start with that. That gives us some extra space on our UV map too that we can use when we make the other pieces and unwrap. So this actually should be pretty good. So we'll just kind of pack that in there right about there. And all I did was select everything and just kind of shift scale it down uniformly, right? So we've got a lot of extra room to add more stuff, and we've got our initial pieces, okay? Now, what's great about this is using our duplicate special. See, we've got all these pieces laid out. Let's just make sure nothing's touching. Everything looks okay. Everything's good. Okay. So the auto layout is huge. The UV packing will. You used to have to do it by hand, so having that is huge, right? Okay. So again, we're going to go like before. First, I'm going to click everything. Go modify, freeze transformations. So that means we're going to zero out all the transforms on each of those pieces. So everything's zeroed out, right? UV space is the same. We don't want to move these UVs. Once we've set them, we're going to set them and forget them, right? Those UVs are going to stay right there. I don't ever want to move them again. That's where they're going to stay. Okay, if we move them, then we're going to have to alter our texture later down the road as well. So just think like those are good. Okay, so from here, I'm going to take this chest piece, and I'm going to go edit, duplicate special, scale -1, click apply. Okay, I'm going to merge these guys together, combine, right? If I click on my checkerboard, you'll see that they're both using the same UV space, right? So if I color on this side of the model in Mudbox, it's also going to show up on this side, right? Same with my shoulder pad right here. I'm going to go edit, duplicate special. Oops. This guy. Hold on 1 second. Let me just make sure the center point of this guy's set in the middle of the world. This, oh, the center point's not. If the center point is ever moved and you want to set it back, you just click on your object. You click on the D key. You can actually move that center point where you need it to. So right there is good. It'll still keep the same transforms, right? You're just moving its pivot point. So from here, I'm going to go edit, duplicate special. There you go. So put that over there. Here, I'm going to actually normals reverse. Okay. Normals. I don't know why it's crazy on me there. I'll worry about that later. I don't know what's up with that. Okay. Why is that wanting to reverse those normals? Okay, hold on a second. Modify. Oh wait, edit. Lead all by type. History. Modify. You know what? Sometimes it's weird. It leaves its history and it won't delete it when you do a duplicate. So you notice that shoulder right there. I duplicated it over, but when I click on it, it leaves all this weird kind of transform attributes that it just, for some reason, even deleting history doesn't work. So a lot of times when that happens, I'll just duplicate it. I'll go back and delete that one. Click this guy. Modify. This should edit. Delete all by type. History. Modify. There we go. There we go. Now it's good. Maya gets confused sometimes and it likes to keep history on things. This guy will just kind of align in the center. Pocket pack. Edit. Get special. That over is fine. Okay. That's so weird how it does that sometimes. Does it say cut freeze below transform to multi-instance child? Okay, edit. Do it all by type. weird. So weird when it does that sometimes. Oh, you know what? Because I had instance on. That's why. Whoops. That's the reason. Okay, so it was creating an instance. So that's the issue. Normals, reverse, edit, duplicate special, copy, not instance, apply. That guy over. And if I go normals, reverse, there we go. Okay. Okay, click all that. All right, good to go. Okay. And you'll see I've duplicated all those objects, but they're all still sharing all the same UV space. So all the UVs, for example, if I click on this little rocket pack, right, or actually if I click on both, you'll see both the UVs are in the exact same spot. If I started moving these, well, I'm actually moving both at the same time. But for example, if I just click this one, move that guy over, you'll see it was just stacked on top, right? I just moved it over to the side. I don't want to do that.
But if you wanted them to be different, you would do that.
If you wanted them to be different, now you'll have two sets of UVs. You can just move them into a different spot on your UV map, and then you'll have another texture. And that's good for variation, right? Like those shoulder pads, if I wanted to, I could move those UVs to different parts, and then maybe one's a little bit different than the other or something like that, right? Absolutely. And you know what? That's actually a good idea. Well, I'm not worried about this one. Okay. Now I'm just going to stitch this middle piece together. You notice there was a little bit of a gap in there when I duplicated it, but that's fine. We'll just come in, grab the center verts, right? Grab all those, pull all that together. Okay, and then from here we'll go edit mesh, merge components, click apply. I should have put everything together, but just test it out just to make sure. Yeah, looks like it welded everything. Great. And just to double check, we'll come into our actual model. We'll zoom around, make sure there's no holes or anything in there. Everything looks good. Now you'll notice it does have that seam, and that's because we basically duplicated the model to the other side. So we will need to fix that by using some normal smoothing. So in order to do that, we just want to come in here. I think we can just do it on our edge right here. Click this seam. It should go all the way around, close to it. There we go. Normals, soften edge. And that'll clean up that edge. So that gets rid of that weird kind of normals edge that's in there. Okay, so now we've got like a great starter piece. We've got all these UVs to actually do something with. Let me show you what Mudbox does now that we have all this, right? So first thing I'm going to do is I'm actually just going to delete this out of here right now. So we have a clean project with just our model in here, and we'll just go ahead and put that off to the side for review later. So now that we've got our little model here, we'll go modify, freeze transformations, normals, reverse, reverse. This was the same issue. Actually, normals. God, it's so annoying. Okay. Control. It's just you just got to duplicate it. And it's just because it's an instance, so it's set as a child. So you'll keep thinking it's an instance and going back to the original model back and forth. That's unless I set it as a copy. So in order to get around that, you can just duplicate the instance and then it's its own object. Modify, freeze transformations. There we go. Okay. So let's just make sure all this is frozen. Good. We'll go into. Okay. In order to bring this into Mudbox, I'm going to select my entire model. I'm then going to go File. You could say send to Mudbox, but it doesn't always work, so I just like to do this the other way just in case. I'm going to go Export Selection. Okay. Click that. It's going to give me a little prompt here. I'm just going to go to my desktop, make it an FBX export. If you don't see FBX export in this list, it's just because the plugin's not activated. So in order to activate that plugin, if you don't see it in there, you go Window, Settings, Preferences, then you go down to Plugin Manager. In here, these are all the plugins that Maya has. You don't need to activate all of these because you're not going to be using probably most of them. But if FBX isn't activated, you'll find it in this list. It should be FBX Export you should have in here. And just make sure that's checked. Let's see. So let's see it in this list. It might already be just defaulted on some of you, and some of you won't. Looks like it already is on mine. There's also OBJ export too, but we're going to use FBX export. So just go File, Export Selection, make sure it's set to FBX export, go to your desktop or wherever you have it, and then just go whatever it is, Robo Pieces, right? Robo Pieces. And actually, you know what? I'm going to click on everything in here and then just go to Mesh, Cleanup, real quick, and we'll just click Non-Manifold Geometry, make sure that's fixed, click Apply. It looks like there wasn't anything, just fine. Again, I'm just going to go File, Export Selection, Robo Pieces, great, Export Selection, yes. Okay. Now, I could have gone in and named a lot of these, which actually probably should have been a good idea. You know what? Actually, let's do that before we do that. That was just a quick way of doing it, but I'm just going to go ahead and name these so I know what the hell things are when I'm in Mudbox, right? So this cylinder, we'll just call it Rocket. P cube 2, oh, we don't need to worry about that. Let's leave that there for now. Nothing in this group. You'll see a lot of these groups sometimes, these empty groups, you can just delete them. They're not attached to anything. And those are from previous things, like if you had copies or instances, things like that. Maya just defaults and creates groups, so you can go ahead and delete those. Okay, so we'll go chest, shoulder pad, piece. Chest detail, shoulder pad, rocket, and chest detail. Okay. And again, let's go back in here. File, Export Selection, Robo Pieces, FBX, Export Selection, yes. Okay. Going to now first save my scene. Save scene as, we'll just call it Robo Dude. Save that on my desktop. Then I'm going to go ahead and open up Mudbox. Go ahead and close this welcome message. You don't need that. Then we'll go into import. Robo Pieces FBX. Say open. Hey, there we go. No errors. Perfect. A lot of times when you're making things in Mudbox, you'll get an error window, and that's just basically saying there's things like non-manifold geometry, non-planar faces, all that kind of stuff, which you'll have to go in and fix. But this looked pretty successful, so we're going to run with it. Okay. Now, immediately when you bring your object into Maya or into Mudbox, I always think it's a little too small. It has sizing, it has scaling issues between Maya and Mudbox. Don't ask me why.
Well, I noticed by default Maya, the units are centimeters.
Yeah, and you'd think it would keep the same in Mudbox, but it doesn't. I think Mudbox is set to meters, but even when you export out of Maya sometimes as meters, it doesn't come out
The right
good.
side.
And also, if you change the units in Maya to meters, it like bugs out. Like it's like you got to change like the camera depth and all kinds of stuff. It just gets all crazy. Yeah, it's like meant for centimeters. So just something you got to get around. But what I like to do is I'll just come in here and go to my object list, select all these guys, all these pieces, and then just go into select move tools, scale, and just scale them up.
It looks pretty shitty now.
What's that?
It looks really bad now.
Yeah. Right? And then we'll just deselect. Okay. And now when you're clicking the different pieces, the way Mudbox works is anytime you click a piece in the object hierarchy here, it's going to select it, right? Which is kind of annoying because you don't necessarily want to select them all the time, but it just shows that it's highlighted. And the only way to get rid of that is by right-clicking on a piece and saying deselect. Okay? So just so you know, if you see that, you're just like, why is my thing yellow? Like, I can't get it off yellow. You just hover over it, right-click it, say deselect. Okay? Now, the reason we have all of these pieces named, and so we can see what we're doing, is now we can turn them off, right? So let's say we want to start with this chest piece, right? So we'll go to chest, right? Let's turn off every single one of these other pieces in here so we can just work on this, okay? And again, I'm going to turn off my thing, okay? Now, when I scaled it up, it did kind of get off center, but that's okay. We can just use the local x-axes of the model to work from, so it shouldn't be a big deal. I also like to click off the side of my model, right-click my scene, go to wireframe, just so I can see what the wireframe of my model looks like, right? It just kind of helps me kind of visualize where I am on my model. And then I also like to right-click and go to flat lighting. Okay, this will really help me see my texture when I'm painting it, right? And we can turn the lighting back on once we get a nice texture in there. Okay, so with that being said, then I'm going to go right into my paint tools. I'm going to grab my paintbrush. I'm going to change the color to, we'll start with like a brownish kind of rusty color or something like that. Say done. It'll come down, set it to local X, which is great. So you can see when local X is set, based on the model, it'll use the center X value of whatever model you're working on. So the model could be anywhere in the 3D scene, and it's just working on that model. If you have local X selected, it'll work based on the coordinates of that particular model. If I have X selected, it'll use the X value of the actual scene, which in that case you'd have to reorient the model and get it in the center. So I just like to use local X. Makes a lot of sense. Okay, so now that we have this model set up, first thing I'm going to do is go in and go to Paint a Texture. It's going to give me this little Create New Paint layer. I've noticed, especially in Mudbox, I just get a much better result if I use 4K textures. I just, like, there's something with the way the algorithm works, or I don't know if it's the UV texture space or whatever, but when I use 2048, it's okay. When I use 4096, it just looks a lot better and I get a better result. So just a heads up, I'd recommend that. And it's always better to go higher and then go sample down if you ever need to on game models and all that. You want to keep higher resolution, right? So we'll start with name. We'll just call it chest. Diffuse, right? Or actually, no, robo diffuse. It's not just the chest, it's the whole model. Robot diffuse, that's fine. We want to make sure we're set on the diffuse channel. Diffuse is just a base texture channel, right? We don't have any bumps, layers, no emissives, no normals, none of that in there. We're just painting color on the model. So we want to set it to diffuse, okay? And we click OK. All right, if I go into my layers right here, you're going to see I have the diffuse layer with my texture. Okay, we're set. The strength of it is set to 100. The great thing I love about Mudbox, which makes it really cool, is you can stack your layers. I use Substance Painter too, which does the exact same thing, but actually even a little better, which I'm trying to get here for the school. But this will do just fine for what we're doing in this class. It's kind of like Photoshop, right? Stack layers, you set them to multiply, opacity, all that kind of stuff, overlays, screens, everything, all that's built in here. To change the different layer settings, it's just right here. You've got darken, multiply, color burn, all that stuff. Everything that's in Photoshop is exactly the same in here, right? So we're working on this base layer. First thing I'm going to do is fill this layer in with a color. So I'm going to come down in here and just go flood paint layer. You'll see the minute I do that, that kind of rusty color that I chose, it immediately flooded the entire layer with that, right? Now what I like to do is once I get that nice kind of rusty color in there, I like to use the burn tool just to go in and really start kind of simulating shadows on the model. Burn tool I feel is awesome. It's surprising to me that a lot of other 3D paint programs don't have the burn tool in there because it is such a powerful tool just to start kind of laying down shadows and really start get a good feel for what your model looks like. So we're going to come in here, go on our texture. I'm going to go to the burn tool right here on my texture, and then just going to, not now. Now if you hold the B key, you can adjust the size of your brushes in Mudbox, right? And then in the settings on the size, the strength, we can turn that down a little bit. And if I go to steady stroke, if you want to do like panel lines or anything like that, you'll turn that on and that'll kind of let you drag out lines and stuff like that. We'll keep that off for now because we're just going to paint some shadows. But I'm just going to come right into this model and immediately just kind of start painting some nice little shadows in here. Right? So just kind of go around this guy. Adjust your brush size as needed. Just kind of paint some nice textures in here. Might even make my brush a little bit bigger and just really kind of lay some nice.
Why is the brush circle so much bigger than what it actually lays down?
I think it has to do with the pressure sensitivity. The way the fall, it's actually set on. It's actually the fall off right here of the actual brush. So the fall off is actually smaller inside that region. You can actually adjust that if you want to. I think if I went full, it would just be like boom, but I have it kind of set. I can just kind of come in here and just start laying down some base color. I think using the burn tool is a really good way to kind of get that initial feeling for your model. All right, I'm just painting shadows in here, thinking about what it's going to look like, what I'm going to do for it. And you'll get little artifacts like you see that little triangle that's there. That'll happen, and you can go in and blur those out and stuff. And then eventually when you're done and we go to the polish phase in Photoshop, we can really just clean those up, get those out of there. All right, so just coming in here. Just kind of laying down some initial elements. Now, I like to work, especially on something like a robot like this guy, I kind of like to work back to front. So I kind of think the under layer, the underside of this robot's kind of this rusty metal, where everything on top is going to be more of like a reddish kind of gleamy metal, right? So I like to kind of get these base layers down and any details in there and then start painting over the top of that to get all the other pieces, right? So I'm just kind of coming in here and just laying down. That's why I really like the burn, because I think it gives you a nice kind of variation too, just the way Mudbox it works in Mudbox. It has a almost a painterly quality to it, which I think looks pretty nice. And then you can do the flip side. Let me just get a little more in here. You can do the flip side and grab the dodge tool is right next to it, and start laying in some lights. Oh, it's probably the video that we're recording, I'm assuming. Alright, so come in here. I'm just kind of using the dodge tool to kind of lighten up areas where the light would hit this guy. And I like to be just kind of broad with my painting at first, and then start refining it and putting in, more details. Like for example, you want to come into some of these edges, bring your brush size way down. Kind of zoom in a little bit, and then just start hitting these edges.
Now, in most game engines, the dynamic lighting will do that as well.
Absolutely, yeah. Dynamic lighting will, but when you got a really nice texture that's lit too underneath it, it just accentuates it, right? It makes it look even better. So it's a good idea just to spend some time on your texture, make it look halfway decent. Okay, so this won't do a ton of work, but just kind of get an idea for what this guy looks like in here.
Actually reminds me of an armor made of sand.
Right? Yeah. And then, if you want to get extra special, you can come in with the stencil tools. Grab like the grime, right? Bring your brush size up a little bit. Start laying in some dirty kind of metal on there.
Why does it keep popping up and
So as you start painting, it goes away. So it kind of shows you where the stencil is, and then the minute you start painting, it takes it away so you can see what you're doing, basically.
How do you rotate the stencils again?
Huh?
How do you rotate the stencils?
Now to rotate the stencil, you hold the Q, or is it the Q? No, I'm sorry, the S key. S key will let you kind of zoom in using your mouse and standard rotate tools and stuff. As long as you hold S, it'll do that.
But we can change the color of the stencils, right?
Yeah, so if you want to use the actual material of like stencils or whatever, you got to use projection. So it's a little bit different. Stencil is actually laying a stencil down. But let's say I actually wanted to put a material on there, I would use this projection right there, and that'll actually paint what the material is. Let's see. Good. Check the burn. Oops. Just kind of adding some grime.
Right out of Star Wars.
What's that?
Right out of Star Wars.
Just add a little grime. So then, on something like a robot, what I like to do, and these are just some texturing tips. You want to get those panel lines and make it look like it's actual like steel that's bolted together and stuff like that. What I like to do is come in with my lazy mouse. So go to my paintbrush, choose something like a nice black or really, really dark gray. And my paintbrush, Color will go black. Okay. I'll go down to my steady stroke. Turn up to like 12. And in here, you can really drag out like those nice lines.
What was this tool name again? Steady stroke?
It's just, yeah, you just turn steady stroke on. And so that'll let you get those kind of nice lines, which you can line up with the geometry too, which is really nice, right? So you can see like, okay, you don't have to do much work, you just got to get that kind of preview line close to where you can and then just pull it out, right? So you can come in here, even highlight some of these edges. And sometimes it'll kind of goof up like that. It doesn't want to do it on that side. If you go the other way, it'll fix it. And that's just Mudbox. Like, it's good, but it's not perfect, you know. Just gotta take your time with it. All right. Right, and so if it's something like a robot, let's say I'm making these panel lines and whatever, to kind of accentuate those, I do a couple things. One is I'll get my dodge tool and I'll just kind of come on the top edge of those, right, and just kind of burn in where the light would hit it, right? That would work on like armor or metal or lines on cars or any of that kind of stuff. All right, just gonna come in there, hit those up. All right, so it starts to give it that depth, right? It starts to make it feel like it's got these layered pieces. Let's see, do that. And then what's the other thing I do? I like to come in and add little detail elements. So, you know, mixing layers is another huge part of it. So just like in Photoshop, if we come in here and just say new layer,